Well, hello there and welcome to another video in which I attempt to make my own clothes. In today's episode, I try and make a pleated tennis skirt. I think my Instagram algorithm knows that I like these skirts because I have been seeing them everywhere. But I thought to myself, instead of buying from and supporting a corrupt, unethical, exploitative fast fashion brand, I would try and make my own, and hopefully in the process I can show you how you can make one too. Okay, without further ado, let's get stuck in. In the essence of traditional tennis playing, and by traditional I of course mean Wii Sports, no I'm kidding, I mean like 1920s ladies playing tennis. Like them, I have opted for a plain white lightweight cotton fabric. I believe the material I'm using used to be the lining of an old pair of curtains, so I am really living up to my one true hero, Maria Fontrap from The Sound of Music, who would never let a good pair of old curtains go to waste. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is take a few bodily measurements. Your waist, your hips, and the distance between your waist and your hips. Take your waist measurement and times it by 3. This will give you the width of your fabric. And also, don't forget to add seam allowance. Now, you might be thinking, this seems like a hugely excessive amount of fabric for a little mini skirt, but trust me, pleats are fabric eating monsters and they will just swallow this all up. So it really does need to be like 3 times your waist length plus seam allowance. As for the length, that can be anything. It's totally up to you whether you want 1920s length or 2020s length. That is totally up to you. Now it's time to make the pleats. Firstly, you need to decide how many pleats that you want. The more pleats you have, the narrower they'll be. The less pleats you have, the wider they'll be. I opted for a happy medium at 16 pleats in total. Divide your waist length by the number of your desired pleats. This will give you your individual pleat width. At this point, I also marked in my seam allowance onto the fabric to make sure I didn't include them in any of the pleats that I was about to make. Then I went ahead and marked in 1.5 inches all the way across the top and bottom edge of the fabric, and I marked it by snipping little notches into the fabric. Then it's simply a case of folding your pleats into position and submission. Yes, make these pleats your bitch. So to do this, your first and third markings are going to kiss, so bring them to meet with each other. Your second marking in the middle of those two is what I call the third wheel, and that is your folding point. Repeat this across the whole piece of fabric, and once secured in place, iron your lovely pleats flat. Did you think we were finished with the maths? Oh. No. Okay, so the distance between your waist and your hips is the distance that you should be sewing down your pleats. So for me, this was 6 inches, and you should mark this distance across your skirt. However, we cannot simply sew our pleats straight down because this leaves no room for our curvy bod. I mean, we have to accommodate for these childbearing hips that we women have. I might not look like Kim K, but I still have curves. So we need to calculate the difference between our waist and our hip measurement. For me, this was 9 inches. Divide this measurement by the number of pleats that you have. So I divided 9 by 16, which gave me roughly ½ an inch. This is therefore the amount you must move each pleat away from their natural pleat line. Now, this is much easier to do than to explain, but basically I measured and adjusted the position of each pleat so that it was laying around ½ an inch away from its natural pleat line at the hip point. Therefore, my skirt should be perfectly tailored to my hips. And in the wise words of Shakira, my hips don't lie, and they need that extra space. Once our pleats are pinned and in position, we simply sew them down with a straight stitch. The skirt should really be coming together at this point. Brace yourself. it's time to add in the zip. But first we need to close up the back of the skirt, at least until the point at which the zip starts. So mark the point at which the zip ends, and with right sides together, sew up the back of the skirt. I think zips can be pretty intimidating, especially if you're new to sewing, but I will try and talk through this as clearly as possible. And for reference, I just used a normal zip for this. If you feel confident enough to put in an invisible zip, then you should definitely go ahead and do that. Folding the seam allowance over neatly, I placed the zip like so, with the zip teeth facing up. Put your zipper foot on the machine. This will allow you to stitch so much closer to the zip. So straight down one side. You will probably have to move the zipper pull out of the way whilst you do this. And when you get to the end, stop, lift your presser foot and pivot everything round 90 degrees and sew across this bridge. Pivot again and sew up the other side of the zip. However, this time, move the edge of the fabric over to cover the zip teeth and then sew. This means that the zip has this neat flap over it which covers and hides it and just makes it look way more professional. And now we have a fully functioning zip. Woohoo! The time has come to add in the waistband. Measure around the waist of your skirt and add around 2 inches onto this length. Cut out a rectangle by this length and however wide that you want your waistband to be. I cut mine to be 3 inches wide. If you have interfacing, apply it to your rectangle. This will give your waistband so much more structure and stability. Finish the raw edges of this piece by either overlocking it or sewing it with a zigzag stitch. With right sides together, pin the waistband along the edge of the skirt with the excess fabric spilling out on one side. Fold the rectangle over and sew the excess fabric around the edge like this. Flip this corner out and round and you should have this nice little flap. Fold around the rest of the waistband and sew it down. I tried to sew in the existing seam so that the stitches were hidden and invisible. This technique is called stitch in the ditch. I then sewed on a little hook closure onto the flap to finish it off. You could also add a button here if you prefer that. Last but not least, I hemmed the skirt to my desired length and then called it a day. And here we have a very homemade tennis skirt. If you've been following along and you decide to make this skirt, please feel free to tag me on Instagram. I'm just at Vintage Thirsty. I would love to see your versions of this skirt. Well, thanks so much for sticking with me and watching all the way till the end. I genuinely hope that you enjoyed it. If you didn't, well, that's 10 minutes of your life you'll never get back. But if you did, feel free to subscribe and maybe I'll see you in my next video.